Hello guys, and welcome to a new Steel Division video today by me, Vulcan. Today I have for you the battle group overview for the 2nd Panzer Division. Now this has been requested a lot in the past, and finally here I am with the proper battle group overview. I've of course done reviews of all of these DLC divisions in the past, which was just sort of me brushing across all of the units and sort of having a quick look. But now I have what I think is the strongest for me to use. This is all, of course, my opinion, but for those of you unfamiliar with the series, I just go through all of the different units and suggest why or why not I take them. And that will hopefully give a better understanding of how I personally use the divisions, and whether or not you decide to replicate that or not is up to you guys. There are, of course, all of the other battle group overviews available in the playlist below, so make sure you go check that out if you're interested in any of the other divisions. I still have 2 more to do upon release of this video. So, let's start off by jumping into the Recon. So, Recon is quite interesting with the 2nd Panzer because there's a lot of interesting units. But in Phase A, it's pretty simple for me. I just have 2 cards of 2 Speertroop. And these guys are pretty cool because they have the 2-star veterancy. Now that doesn't really affect the Recon squad itself, the Speertroop, because you want to keep them hidden, you want to use that very good stealth. But it does affect the half-track, and the half-track can definitely come in handy to support your other infantry units, because it helps pin down things very quickly. It's very accurate, of course, 2-star veterancy, and just in general can cut down infantry in the open very quickly. So that's what I would use the half-tracks for. Speertroop, your limited availability, so keep them hidden. You can, of course, bring in these SBW 233s, and these used to be really good because they used to have very high optics, but now they do not. They've really fallen out of favour, and it's unfortunate, but that's just how it is at the moment. Moving into Phase B, I bring now 3 units of Speertroop. I've made some quick adjustments to this division before I started the video because I was just sort of going through them all, and I always check this like every now and then, what I use and what I don't use, and I replace the stuff I don't use. So in this case, I used to have the Aufklärer in the Kubel MGs, and I used to have the Pumas, but I never found that I brought these Pumas in because I was using the Panzer IVs in the tank tab all the time, and these Pumas were just supported by or the Panzer IVs would just be supported by Speertroop anyway, so why do you need a Puma? So yeah, I removed these and I just replaced them with Speertroop, and it gave me an open slot for the Phase C Recon that I have. Now, one Recon unit I would suggest you definitely have is the Aufklärer Panther D. Now, it is a very expensive Panther at 300 points. It's the most expensive Panther in the game. But it's incredibly important you bring this in as the 2nd Panzer because it's the only sort of medium/heavy tank that you can get in this phase, in Phase B. And it's not even that expensive for the phase, in the sense that you get 150 points per minute, which means this is technically 2 minutes of income worth in order to bring it out. Furthermore, you can obviously save for this going into Phase B if you have enough cash or you're far enough ahead. And it can really help you out just to seal the deal moving into Phase B. Just really puts a unit on the field that can challenge a lot of the Phase B armor that will be coming out of the Allied side. So I think it's crucial to have this in. The optics, honestly, are just a bonus. They're not really what make you bring in this tank in the first place. So yeah, Pumas, I don't bring them in anymore quite simply because I found I didn't use them. I already explained that. But the Aufklärer Panzer IV-J, again, I don't really use them. I would much rather just have the Panzer IV-Hs that you can bring in the tank tab and then support them with Recon infantry. So that's just a playstyle thing for me. Also, I'm really not a fan of high optics as opposed to very high that you get on infantry. These Aufklärer Panzer IV-Js and also the Pumas, they still get ambushed by AT guns because they can't spot them in tree lines very easily. And moving into Phase C, you can get more units of Speertroop, and honestly, getting more availability of Speertroop is always nice, but in this case, I'm going to be taking the 222s because although 222s kind of become a little bit redundant towards Phase C, there's always those moments when you'd like to have that 20mm autocannon support, especially from a 2-star 222, which can be, of course, a 3-star if it's near command units. And if it's a 3-star 222, well, that will be ripping to shreds most things that aren't armored very quickly, including AT guns. So this could be a very nice fire support unit to have next to, say, a Panther, which can therefore rip to shreds infantry, whilst your Panther sort of focuses on enemy tanks, for example. Of course, it does bring in the Aufklärers as well, which of course gives you more infantry availability moving into the late game, and I think that's always a good idea to have. The SBW 231s, they're kind of redundant since you can get these 222s with Aufklärer, and once again, only high optics instead of very high optics, which is why in general I prefer infantry recon over vehicle recon. So let's move into the infantry tab. Now the infantry tab's really cool with this division. There's like, of course, the Sturmgrenadiers, they are awesome. But let's start in Phase A. In Phase A, I take one of the cards of Panzergrenadier. These guys are fantastic. They have the 2-star veterancy, which gives them a really nice large command radius. You also have 3-on-1 card, which is great, and is better than 2, which you often get with other 2-star veteran command infantry units in Phase A on the Axis side. So yeah, this is a really strong card, and also gives you a 253 half track, which again is helpful for pinning down infantry and just fire support in general. I'm taking one card of Panzergrens, and then one card of Sturm Pioneers. Now, both of these have 1-star veterancy, and it does make them pretty strong squads on their own. But again, with command nearby, you get 2-star veterancy, and then they really come to life. And same deal with the half tracks. You can definitely put the pain into opposing units with these 2 sets of squads. Panzergrenadiers are great for sort of engaging at a distance. They have the 9HE at 400 meter range, which can really pin down infantry advancing onto your position, or maybe sort of engage units from a distance, like say like a rifle squad with Bren guns. You can engage them from a distance with the MGs, and you will pretty much always win that engagement because the MGs just put down so much suppression. On the other side, stark contrast to Panzergrens, you have Sturm Pioneers, which are great at close range, and these really help you secure sort of towns and stuff early on, or just building complexes on a map. And so yeah, 2 of these have very distinct sort of uses, but therefore I think it's a good idea to have both moving into Phase A. Now you can get like 2-star versions of them, but I'm not entirely a fan of limiting my availability. Yes, you only lose 1, but that can make the difference in Phase A, in my opinion. So I avoid bringing in the 2-star Sturm Pioneers. And a flamethrower squad, in my opinion, doesn't necessarily need to be that high vet in order to do its job properly, since it's hard to miss the flamethrower. Or at least you'd think so. Anyway, moving into Phase B, we have the beautiful Sturmgrenadiers, and these guys are fantastic. There is no reason not to bring both squads of these. They have 10 MP44s between them, with 15 HE in total, which can engage at 200 meter range. This means that they are king in towns, especially. Not so much in forests, because you will bump into the other units at 100 meter range, which might share a similar HE value, but definitely in towns where the 200 meter range engagement is the range engagement in which squads are sort of jumping between buildings, and that's when you really do like a hell of a lot of damage with these Sturmgrenadiers. Their veterancy helps. The fact they have 3 smoke grenades is amazing, and they also have a Panzerfaust. So really strong squads, and I bring both cards available in this division. Other choices for Phase B are MG42s, but there's no space if I'm bringing the Sturmgrenadiers. And Sturmfeuer are great. They have smoke grenades and they have a close range HE grenade, but I believe if you take these, then you really limit yourself with availability moving into the late game, which is really something that you need to be wary of. So talking of late game, in the late game I bring in the 6 card of Panzergrens with the AT. These guys are fantastic. Like in Phase A, your Panzergrens don't have AT, but the late game Panzergrens do. and that just makes them extremely versatile and really useful. I would go for 2-star Panzergren squads, but again, don't want to limit my availability. Would go for Pioneers, but I feel like Panzergrens are more versatile, and Pioneer Führers, again, really nice squad, and I wish I could bring them in because a 251-9 at 2-star going on to 3-star can be extremely effective. But again, limited availability on infantry otherwise, and that's really not something you want to do with this division. You want to always make sure you have the infantry that can accompany your tanks as you push forwards, especially through Phase B. It's extremely important that you gain an advantage through Phase B, since that's your real power phase with the 150 points per minute. Right, moving on to the tank tab, I have both of the Panzer IV-Hs in Phase A, extremely strong. If you bring in both of them, it's going to be hard for your enemy to deal with, that's for sure. You will want to watch out for the 11 AP AT guns, like 6-pounders, because they will penetrate your Panzer IVs quite nicely, but support them with Recon well, and you shouldn't really be caught out. It's just, they work so well if you can bring them both in and use them together in the same area. I actually showed it on one of my streams recently, like just the power of the 2nd Panzer if you can concentrate in one area. So that's what that's what I sort of intend to do with the Panzer IV-H. Now these Panzer IV or Panzer IIIs with 2-star veterancy, they just really don't make the cut because of the cards you need to use in order to have enough tank availability through Phase A and B. So that's why they're not in my division. Also, the fact that you only get like 1 per card is a bit shocking, really. Now, moving into Phase B, there is access to Stug 3s, but in my opinion, bringing both of the Befehl Panzer IV-Hs is a good idea. I've got Ramsch here, but that's, again, just a normal Befehl Panzer IV-H, and these guys are both very good for continuing your aggression in Phase B next to, say, the Panther D in the Recon tab, if you can afford it, obviously. But yeah, you can definitely afford at least one of these Panzer IVs per minute, and if you haven't lost your Panzer IV-Hs from Phase A, you can see what I'm getting at. You're definitely going to have a lot of armour that's going to be starting to roll forwards. Stug 3s just don't make the cut because of lack of veterancy, really, more than anything. Now moving into Phase C, I'm got a card of Panzer IV-Hs with 2-star veterancy once again. These can go up to 3-star veterancy, really competitive still in Phase C. Also, the fact that your income lowers quite significantly means that you do need to have an affordable option moving into the late game. So that's where the Panzer IV comes in. I have the Befehl Panther, and I have a card of Panther A 2-stars, and the reason I don't bring in, like, say 2 cards of 2 Panther A's is because I really like having all my Panthers together if I can. Having Panthers on their own is probably one of the biggest mistakes that I see players make in Steel Division. One of, not the biggest, but one of the biggest. Having a Panther, or even like a King Tiger, say, on its own, unsupported, is just waiting to be bombed and then just rushed down by multiple units. It really is. And therefore, I would always recommend you have like a Panther next to another Panther, or a Panther next to a Panzer IV, or whatever. Just make sure you have something else that is there that would stop, or well, stop either a push if your Panther gets pinned, or will force your opponent to invest more in order to push back both of the tanks rather than just one. And that's definitely something that is important, because otherwise you're going to be losing these very easily when you can't really afford it in the later phases. Now, another thing to note about these Panthers is if you are planning to bring them in, and if you feel like you need them, make sure you give yourself a couple minutes of income from Phase B to save up for them at the start of Phase C, so you can bring one in almost immediately. It will give you a massive swing of momentum, and just in general will put you in a good position as long as you don't get it killed easily. So that's my setup there. And yeah, the reason for not having 2 cards of 2 Panther A's is quite simply so I have the the Befehlpanther, providing the veterancy, because I'll almost always have 2 Panthers close by if I can. And yeah, that's kind of my theory there. Moving on to the support tab. In Phase A, I do bring in the 258s. I think these 1-star veterancy are absolutely amazing at supporting the Panzer IVs. They really give you that extra HE that's necessary to pin things down. Like, say if you have one of these with one Panzer IV and an AT gun just randomly starts firing at you, it misses the first shot. If a Panzer IV and this fire back at that AT gun, they will almost always pin it down immediately, regardless of range. Because usually, in order for a Panzer IV to pin down an AT gun once it reveals itself, it needs to be within machine gun range. But if you have a 258 supporting it, then that generally doesn't need to be the case. And yeah, I would exclusively use these 258s to support the Panzer IVs in Phase A. That's my theory behind them. In Phase A, you can get these Borgwards, and Borgwards in general are a really nice flavor unit for this division, but their usefulness is limited, like extremely limited, and that's why you won't find them in my division personally. I don't need Phase A supply. I think, honestly, you don't have any artillery that needs to be resupplied in Phase A as a 2nd Panzer, so bringing in Phase A supply seems a bit silly. You won't have easy access to smoke either, so that's another reason not to, because if anything gets, say, pinned or track damaged or whatever, it's generally dead, because you're not going to have units close by to smoke it, for example. That's what I'm trying to get at there. So therefore you won't need this vehicle in order to repair it. So moving on to Phase B, SBW 232s, really good for accompanying your tanks, accompanying APCs even, or like just, like half tracks is what I'm thinking of. It can accompany like the Panzer IIs that you can get in Phase A from your artillery tab. This thing just helps in general across the map, providing you with command. It's also 2-star, so the command radius is really nice, and it's just a really good addition in Phase B. Now in Phase B, I do start bringing in the supply, because I think it's necessary to have some at that phase, both for repairs and also for ammunition at that point. The Guerrilla doesn't quite make it because it's 1,000 meter range, and honestly I haven't really seen much effectiveness out of it, and doesn't really outshine any of the other units that I've chosen. So yeah, it doesn't deserve a slot in the support tab where you only have 4 slots available. The last slot goes to the Flampanzer 251-16, which is a Phase B unit, 2-star veterancy. Can really take your opponent by surprise. If you come in with like a couple of these into like a town or a forest area, you can do a lot of work. The only way that really opponents can deal with a Flampanzer is either like hard armor, like, I don't know, a tank like a Sherman or a Cromwell, or if an AT infantry or AT on an infantry squad hits first time, because if it doesn't, then these Flampanzers will almost always pin them down and kill them off. So these Flampanzers can be incredible for making ground in Phase B if they are used correctly, but they are pretty niche, since you don't really want to have them in open ground. Now in Phase C, you do get access to 259s, and these are 2-star veterancy, but in my opinion don't really make the cut. You won't really have the cash to spend on these, and if you are bringing in 20mm autocannon units, it will be from the Recon tab with the Alpha credit anyway, so not really needed. Borgwards once again, and more munitions. I don't know if there's any space for this, just due to the sheer limited amount of cards that you can pick in the support tab of the 2nd Panzer. Now moving on to the anti-tank tab, we have the Panzerschreck, as my first choice. I think I've kind of fallen in love with Panzerschreck squads recently. Their 250 meter range makes them very nice for catching out tanks near roads and just in locations where armor often goes. I can't really say how to identify that. It's more just a thing that comes with experience. Like when you play the game more, you'll identify where people tend to send their armored vehicles more often, and therefore can place your Panzerschrecks accordingly. Also, because Panzerschrecks do have very good stealth, they can sneak around quite easily in the open. As long as your opponent doesn't have any very high optic recon, these Panzerschrecks can get into very dodgy locations for your opponents that allow you to use these Panzerschrecks to kill things quite easily. The other great thing about Panzerschrecks in general is that they are only 30 points, and most of the time they're going to be killing a tank, if anything. And if they do, well, they pay themselves off almost 3 times over for the most part. They do come with a 250-10, and this thing's just a fantastic APC killer and half-track killer. So if you're up against something like a 3rd Panzer, or the 3rd Armoured, sorry, or just any particular division that makes uses of a lot of half-track, something like the Guards Armoured would be a good example. A 250-10 is just really, really good, especially at 2-star veterancy for popping half-tracks at a distance. So that's what that's also good for. Now in Phase A, I also bring in both of the Pak 40s. I think these are essential for supporting your Panzer IV pushes. Like if you push through early on with the Panzer IV 258 combination, and like you've used your artillery to make a little bit of ground, and you've advanced onto that ground, that's when you want to bring in these Pak 40s after the initial push has gone through, because that will allow you to solidify your position and also catch out reinforcements which would be unaware of the Pak 40 arriving. I would never recommend really bringing in the Pak 40s at the start of the game, because I feel like they become an instant target, which then your opponent tries to play around. But if you sort of make them play around the Panzer IV and the 258 early on, then they won't be ready for the Pak 40 when you decide to use it. And that is the key with this division, in the anti-tank tab at least. Now moving into Phase B, you do have the option to get 6 Panzerschrecks. And if there was an extra slot, this would be my next choice, because having another 6 squads of Panzerschrecks is just crazy. It's a crazy high availability unit or pack, and that's a lot of firepower that can kill a lot of tanks. But instead I go for a pack of 2 Pak 40s, because once again they're just really good for solidifying position after you make ground. And the beauty is that you often have enough half-tracks to redeploy them quite often. Even these Pak 40s, they come in with half-tracks in the first place, and that makes them very hard to kill. So say even if your opponent does have, say, artillery or aircraft to pin down your Pak 40s, as soon as it's not pinned again, you just pick it up and put it somewhere else, and it just becomes a problem again. That they have to try and deal with a second time round, and that is the beauty of having the half-track with the Pak 40. In the Phase B ones don't have it, the SDK of Z10 disappears after it unloads, but the fact is you'll still have a lot of half-tracks around, so Pak 40s are still as versatile. I would maybe bring in the 2-star one if I didn't require the availability so much, but I think it's important to have that extra AT gun in Phase B. In Phase C, I don't think there's any point bringing in Jagdpanzers. You'd be relying on Panthers primarily for your hard-hitting long-range AT, so Jagdpanzers don't really make the cut, especially considering there isn't, again, enough slots for me to put them in. Same goes for the Jagdpanzers in Phase B. You'll be relying, again, on the Panther, Aufklärer Panther D. Okay, so that is anti-tank. Let's move on to anti-air. Now the anti-air from the 2nd Panzer is absolutely awesome. I really, really love these Flak 38 20mm that come in the Gepards. This is such a strong combination of like anti-air, there's no reason not to bring them. Like 2-star veterancy for one is insane. Make them 3-star veterancy, and these things have some serious lethality. Like they can shoot down planes very quickly if they fly over the top of them. You have both of these in phase A Spitfire is going down if it flies overhead. And yeah, that is what makes these squads specifically really good. And like, you're technically getting 4 anti-air in a single card, and for 2-star veterancy. That's like the same as these Flak 38 20mm, like the 4 you can get in there. Again, these come in the Gepards, but the extra veterancy is what makes them really strong. And it's more than adequate for phase A anti-air. So there you go. Moving into phase B, the Flak 36 is my choice. I like to have the extra range on my anti-air, which allows them to engage enemy aircraft sooner, which makes the dispersion of the bombs bigger and therefore less likely to hit your units effectively. Whereas things like a flak filling, yes, they have more lethality once again, and the ability to shoot down aircraft very easily, but the Flak 36 really stops the bombing strikes from being effective in the first place. And then these, coupled with the air tab, are what I use to deal with like an air force that's harassing me in the game. So that's my phase B. Moving into phase C, you can't go wrong with the 2-star mobile wagons. And these things are, again, pretty lethal because of their high veterancy. So very, very strong units, 13 HE, 1000 meter range again, very important for stopping bombing strikes from being effective before they hit you, rather than, you know, hitting the aircraft after they fly overhead and the bombs have already been dropped. So that's sort of the mentality that I tend to like to go with my anti-air in general. Some people prefer to go the flak filling route, and fair enough, but in my opinion, it's important to stop the bombing strikes from being effective in the first place, rather than shooting down the aircraft after the fact. Flak 41s, really not as effective as they used to be, so don't find a place in the division. Moving on to the artillery tab. Now, phase A is really interesting with the artillery on the 2nd Panzer. They don't have any ammunition-based artillery, so that's why you don't require munitions in phase A. You only have access to the BEO Panzer IICs, and these come in with 173mm off-map. Now, this can be really fantastic for countering mortars early on, and it can also be fantastic for killing AT guns early on, any you spot with like your speed through, for example. And just using this to pin them down, not necessarily kill them, allows your 258 and your Panzer IV and all of the infantry and stuff to go and run those down, all of the half tracks you have access to and all that good stuff. Now, one thing I will say is try not to get this Panzer II into combat until it's used up all of its strikes. But afterwards, yeah, feel free to just chuck it in, use it to kill loads of half tracks, use it to kill tanks at close range. Like, this is just a normal Panzer II that can be just as annoying and get lots of kills by itself with its 20mm autocannon that also has, of course, the 173mm off map. It's always important to have at least one of these in phase A. You don't want to go into a game without phase A artillery, otherwise you'll be finding that you struggle to deal with certain divisions that can maybe counter your air tab instead. Moving into phase B, the mortars are a little bit redundant when you can get Vespers, and the beauty of the Vespers is they're 150 points, so you can bring in like 1 per minute. You can always afford them in phase B, and therefore it's just an easy choice. They have the 2,400 meter range compared to the 1,200 meter range. They still have smoke, so that you still have that sort of utility, and they're also a bit meatier in a sense that they don't get killed by counter batteries so easily, and they don't get pinned down as easily either. So yeah, Vespers are fantastic, again, just for breaking through any AT you're having trouble with, also for counter battering any artillery that's giving you issues, all that good stuff. The Panzer IV with the 173mm off map isn't really that great. It's only got Well, it's got the 8 front armor and 14 AP as to be expected, but this artillery is just a bit naff, and it's just not. It's pretty expensive for what you get. This Hummel, I have one card of them. They are 2-star Hummels, and they are fantastic for, again, dealing with any units that are getting in your way, as well as counter battery. 2,800 meter range with 27 HE. When these hit things, they hurt, and they pin down enemy units very quickly indeed, and that is beautiful. Definitely what you need. These are very accurate. They have a reasonable rate of fire due to the extra veterancy, and yeah, I would also recommend maybe having like a 232, like SPW 232 sit with these if you're going to use them, to make them 3-star veterancy. They'll be even better. So that's my choice for artillery. In terms of air, I have the Ju-88S in Phase A. This thing can be incredible sometimes. It really can. It's interesting because it's sort of a cluster bomber. It says 5 HE here, but it's got 96 5 HE explosives, which means that if you sort of fly over the top of an open top vehicle, it will almost always die if you hit it with this bombing strike. Another awesome thing that you can do is at the start of the game buy it. It's a pretty expensive investment though, but if you hit the enemy convoy, you can often kill off like multiple units before the game's even started. Now that can be risky, of course. Like I said, it's 200 points. But another great thing about this bomber is its 600 km/h speed. And that means it can pretty much outrun most Phase A fighters and just get out before it even gets fired upon. So yeah, this Ju-88 is pretty safe to bring in on its own in Phase A. If you're going to wait and bring it in Phase B, for example, then I would definitely have it supported by at least one Focke-Wulf, or just make sure you have AA that can cover it as it escapes. But yeah, this can be an extremely lethal bomber, and that's what I really love about it. Phase A Focke-Wulfs, I would bring them in, but I don't really have the availability or activation points to do so. In Phase B, you do have access to 2-star Focke-Wulf 190s. These aren't as good as they look though, because they only have 2 HE. Like the Recon's fantastic and all, but really not worth it. And yeah, 750 km/h speed is great, but honestly that's generally a bad thing for a Recon aircraft, since you're not going to be seeing what you're flying over for very long. It's very, very fast. Yeah, not ideal, and never really can shoot anything down. So that's why I don't bring those in. I instead bring in the Focke-Wulf 190 A8 BR21s, which have 2 25 HE power rockets. These things can be incredible for one-shotting AT guns. I've one-shot many 25-pounders with them. And yeah, just in general, really, really strong rocket aircraft, which also have the ability to act as a fighter. Like there are, of course, multi-role. Their speed is ideal, and yeah, just in general, these are your fighters for Phase B. Assisted by your anti-air should be more than enough. You also have access to the Focke-Wulf 190 G1s with the 25 HE power bombs, but those HE power rockets I've seen do a lot of work, and I think they're just a little bit more precise and I guess more reliable than the bomb is sometimes. So that's why I'm preferring the A8 BR21s at the moment. Moving into Phase C, I do have access, well, I have sort of brought in the Focke-Wulf 190 A8s, the fighter variants, but there's always a part of me that considers bringing in the Focke-Wulf 190 G1s from Phase B instead. But it's nice to have like a dedicated fighter, which has the like decent agility with the speed there in order to get kills onto enemy aircraft. So that's kind of my reasoning. Also, they're a lot cheaper than the bomber variants, especially in a phase where you're not getting that much income. So that's again another reason to opt for the fighters over the bombers in the later phases, where you're probably more likely to be defending yourself from enemy airstrikes as you are trying to make your own, since you'll have the powerful units on the ground anyway. So yeah, that's my sort of thought process when it comes to choosing those units. The other thing I would definitely recommend is never use any of your air forces as 2nd Panzer without having your AA set up. Like these are very expensive units, like 200 points for a Ju-88S, 200 points for a Focke-Wulf 190. You don't want to have them shot down for free. Make sure they're covered. So that's very important. And that is the entirety of the 2nd Panzer. Now, just in general as to how I feel they should work. In Phase A, it's all about the Panzer IV 258 push. If you can make ground with that, then fantastic. You know, support it with the Pak-40s. Make sure you continue trying to make ground with the Panzer II-C, backing you up the artillery. Make sure you have like AA in there if you need it. Like if you're being harassed by Spitfires or Hurricanes or something, those Flak 38s are perfect for dealing with that. Then moving into Phase B, this is where you have to push. If you don't make ground in Phase B, then you're doing something wrong. You can really afford to bring out the Aufkläder Panther D if you need it. If not, then focus on bringing out the Befehl Panzer IV-Hs. Support them with the Vespers. Make sure you have the recon availability that you need. And if you're playing through a town at any point, the Sturmgrenadiers should do the job. One thing I will say is be careful letting your Sturmgrenadiers, of course, be engaged at the 100 meter range, as things like AT grenades can definitely do a lot of damage. But you should never really let that happen if you can help it, because you have so many half-tracks and other units that can pin down units in the open. So you can cover your units from all sides almost all times with this division. Now, saying that, it does require you to play quite concentrated. So if you're playing a 1v1, for example, you're going to want to leave a skeleton force on one side of the map and really play concentrated on the other, depending on, you know, what suits your preference, like an open engagement or a town engagement, for example. Say if we're thinking of show, that would be a perfect example of that. But yeah, I think it's very important to keep these units working together rather than spreading out. There are some divisions that really suit spreading out. Like I would say the 1st Panzer is a pretty good one for that, because they have like Cromwell 6s and stuff, which work well on their own. But when it comes to like Panzer 4s and 258s, you want to use them in support of each other, because they can be picked off very easily otherwise. Same with Panthers. Just in general, like a lot of stuff, like your airstrikes coming in, you want it to be like over your AA, so that requires them to be in a certain place on the map and all that sort of stuff. So that's just my thoughts on the 2nd Panzer. Extremely strong if they're concentrated, especially moving towards Phase B. After Phase B, they lose a little bit of their power, but if you've already made ground in Phase B, then it shouldn't matter so much. And that's pretty much it. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed my 2nd Panzer overview. Hopefully you found it interesting. Let me know your thoughts on my division and any changes you would make, or any different sort of units you bring in. I think there's quite a lot of different combinations that you could do for the 2nd Panzer and reasons to bring in lots of different units. So I hope to hear those in the comments. But in the meantime, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.